Philip Reid. Philip Reid, also Philip Reid c. 1820 February 6, 1892, was an African-American master craftsman who worked at the foundries of self-taught sculptor Clark Mills, where historical monuments such as the 1853 Equestrian Statue of Andrew Jackson in Lafayette Square, near the White House in Washington, D.C., the 1860 Equestrian Statue of George Washington in Washington Circle, and the 1863 Statue of Freedom in Washington. Background: Reid, who was an enslaved African American from South Carolina, was born in c. 1820 and became enslaved to Mills when Reid was about 22 years old, according to the 1864 petition made by Mills for compensation after slavery had been abolished. Reid remained in Mills' employ as an enslaved laborer for over 20 years and was finally emancipated in 1863. Equestrian Statue of Andrew Jackson in Washington, D.C. 1853. In 1848, the Jackson Monument Committee commissioned Mills, a self-taught sculptor, to create the equestrian statue of Andrew Jackson, which is now in Lafayette Square, near the White House in Washington, D.C. Mills moved to Washington after winning the competition and brought Reid and his other workmen with him. They erected a temporary foundry south of the White House. According to James M. Good, Mills, with the assistance of his apprentice, Reid, and laborers, produced 6 equestrian statue of George Washington in the Washington Circle 1860. The $60 equestrian statue was executed by Mills in his studio and foundry. The statue was dedicated in 1860 by then-President James Buchanan. The Statue of Freedom 1863, commissioned in 1855, the initial full-size plaster model of Freedom was completed by American sculptor Thomas Crawford in his studio in Rome, Italy. He died suddenly in 1857. A plaster model was cast and divided into 5 main sections for transport in separate crates. Crawford's widow shipped the model to Washington, where it was to be cast into bronze. The crates arrived in late March 1859. An Italian craftsman after emancipation. On April 16, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. District slave owners, like Mills, were allowed to petition for compensation. Mills petitioned for compensation for 11 slaves, including Philip Reid. Reviews of Philip Reid's contributions. In 1863, with the Statue of Freedom newly installed on the Capitol, a newspaper correspondent wrote, "The black master builder lifted the ponderous uncouth masses and bolted them together, joint by joint, piece by piece, till they blended into the majestic Freedom. The facts are that Freedom's successful taking apart and handling in parts as a model was due to the faithful service and genius of an intelligent Negro in Washington named Philip Reid, a mulatto slave owned by Mr. Clark Mill, and that much credit is due him for his faithful and intelligent services rendered in modeling and casting America's superb statue of Freedom, which kisses the first rays of the aurora of the rising sun as they appear upon the apex of the Capitol's wonderful dome." The architect of the Capitol described Reid as the single best-known enslaved person associated with the Capitol's construction history. National Harmony Memorial Park burial. Philip Reid, the slave who built the Statue of Freedom atop the U.S. Capitol, died a free man on February 6, 1892, and is buried here at National Harmony Memorial Park. The plaque honoring Philip Reid was unveiled the National Harmony Memorial Park in Hyattsville, Maryland, on April 16, 2014, the 152nd anniversary of emancipation in Washington, D.C. The plaque used the spelling Reid, which he preferred and had chosen himself after his emancipation in 1863, instead of Reed, which was chosen by Mills in 1842 when he enslaved him. Reid died on February 6, 1892,